Hey, Chandler here, and I'm calling this video Hiring 201. In this video, I'm going to cover advanced recruiting, interviewing, and hiring techniques. All right, so maybe you've seen my video. It's the A-player hiring process. I made that video. It was kind of the ultimate drop the mic on how to hire A players. If you haven't seen that video, I highly recommend that you watch it. It's very thorough. It goes through our recruit, interview, and hire process here at Self-Publishing School. I think it's one of the best things that we do. It's how we consistently hire A players and really great and top performers, okay? So that's a great video, but over the course of the last couple years since I've recorded that video, I've learned some advanced techniques, some things that we're using. So we've modified some things that we're doing. We've changed, we've improved some things, and that's what I want to cover in this video. So maybe you're watching this video. This works really well if you're hiring for a big time position. So maybe it's a leadership position, it's a management position, things like that. Or maybe you're on the team and you've went through this process and now you're responsible for hiring and you want to use some of the processes that we've developed over the last couple of years. So that's what I want to cover in this video. I'm breaking it into 3 parts. We're going recruiting because that's where it all starts. Number 2, we're going into interviewing. And then lastly, we're going into the actual hiring process. And I'm going to share some advanced tips along the way. First, let's talk advanced recruiting. So in the first video, maybe you heard me talk about, we take recruiting very seriously. My goal is to have at least 100 applicants for every position that we fill. Now, obviously, in some ways, this is a little bit easier to do since I run a virtual company, but you heard me talk about Indeed ads. I also talk about how we email our list. There's a bunch of standard stuff that we do, but what I want to talk about is kind of the more advanced techniques that we're using recently. Number 1 is a bounty. So I use a bounty, so maybe this is $1,000 for most positions. This is $3,000, maybe even up to $5,000 for our big time leadership positions. But that's what I do is I say, hey, I'll give you $1,000 if you know this person. So we kind of make it fun. It's a funny image. It's a $1,000 bill, like the SBS dollar with my face on it, wearing an orange goofy cowboy hat. And it's just kind of a funny thing that grabs attention. It's a pattern interrupt. And then when I'm posting on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and elsewhere, people can share that with people that they think is a fit. Okay. So the bounty, it just works really well. And if you think about this, if you're hiring a recruiter or using a recruiter to hire someone for you, they're going to probably charge you a lot of money. Maybe they charge 20% of first year salary. So now all of a sudden you're paying 10 grand, 5 grand, 20 grand, maybe even more to hire someone great. And a bounty is a way to get people to pay attention. And then you're responsible for, once you have that bounty, putting that in front of everyone that you know. Now, speaking of putting that in front of everyone you know, that brings me to number 2, which is focusing heavily on referrals. Like, I'm talking heavily on referrals. So we always use, we use Indeed ads. We've started talking about, and I'll talk about it a little bit, LinkedIn ads. There's a bunch of kind of standard things that we have in our recruiting bag of tricks. But time and time again, the top people that make it to the end are referrals. So these are people who I know. These are people I know that know someone. These are people on the team. They know someone. And so what we found is that although all the other channels were helping us hit like volume or numbers with recruiting, usually when we got down to the final 3 or the final 7, the vast majority of those folks came from a referral. So I want you to really focus on, in the recruiting process, personal referrals. So here's what I do. I just go through and I say, who do I know in this industry or that would know this type of person? And I go through and I personally reach out to at least 10 people a day while I'm recruiting. And I'm usually recruiting for at least 1 to 2 weeks for a position. So I'm going to end up reaching out to 30, 50, maybe even 100 people personally. I have my assistant help out with this. So if you have an assistant, you can use that as well. And so, there's just nothing like scrappy boots on the ground outreach and just continuously reaching out. Another thing I do is I'll go into LinkedIn and I'll say friends I know who have this job title, right? So maybe I'm hiring for a customer success position. Well, I'll search friends with customer success, friends with customer support, friends with all the other different variations of that title. Maybe it's sales, inside sales, account executive, like all the different title variations. So I'm searching friends I know in that industry and I say, hey, who do you know that knows someone who might be a fit for this position? Now, speaking of who do you know, I've got a separate video on that concept. So using that phrase, who do you know? And this works really well. I'm pretty sure I talked about this in the last video, but this just works really well when you're doing this outreach, is to say, hey, who do you know that might be a great fit for this position? And it gives you a chance to brag about the position, like, hey, really awesome position, great team, great company, all those things. I'm looking for your clone is what I'll say a lot of times. If I know like this person's actually a good fit And I talk about this in the Who Do You Know video, so check that out for kind of the full explanation. But that's a really stealth way to get high quality talent, because you're not saying, hey, do you want to work here? You're saying, who do you know? And then that piques their interest. And a lot of times I'll get those folks who say, hey, I actually might be interested, tell me more, right? And then I can share more information with them. I can get them in the recruiting process. Now, the fourth thing that I've started doing is LinkedIn ads. I don't know why I didn't think about this sooner, but I had a friend who said, hey, I'm getting most of my quality candidates through LinkedIn ads. It works really, really well. So it's kind of like localized advertising similar to Indeed. You can do postings, you can do things like that. What I'd recommend is two things, and I'm gonna talk about this in a little bit, and this is specific to hiring virtual, but I'm gonna recommend that you post the job in different cities. So maybe if it's an in-person position, maybe it's the different surrounding cities around you. Or, and this is kind of more importantly, the second tip is change the job title throughout the course of your recruiting process. Okay, this is super important because this is it's gonna refresh the listing, so it's gonna come back up to the top, and also it's gonna get different candidates to come in the door. So I'll give you an example. So I was hiring for a leadership position. I call this a sales manager role. It's also kind of similar to a VP of sales position. It also might be similar to like 3 other titles. So we changed the title of that position throughout the process, and you just get different people who come to take a look, and you get more applications that way. We did the same thing with a customer success position. We did customer success, we did customer support. I think there were even a couple other titles that we used. So change the title, and not only will it bump up to the top, but that'll also help you reach a new audience with that position. Now, lastly, I want to talk about recruiting specific to a virtual company. Okay, so obviously I run a virtual company, so this may or may not apply to you, but I've got 3 tips here that I think just work really, really well. So what we do at Self-Publishing School is we do localized recruiting based on a bunch of different cities. And usually I want to go mid-market cities, okay? So we're talking, this is not the big cities. This is especially not in California where I live, so it's not Los Angeles, San Francisco, things like that. Maybe it's Des Moines, or maybe it's Phoenix or Atlanta, Georgia. Like, what are all the mid-market cities? And then we post jobs, Indeed, LinkedIn, all those different sites local to those cities. And that brings me to tip number 2, specific to virtual, is we look at cities that have kind of a mid to lower cost of living. Because I know it's like, I run a virtual company. Why would I hire someone in New York City or in Los Angeles or in San Francisco or any of these big cities where cost of living is really, really high? Because then they need to make a huge salary, and probably are making a huge salary just to survive and live. I'd prefer to instead go to mid-market cities. I love hiring in the Midwest or other mid-market cities where there's kind of a lower cost of living. So I know that I'm pretty confident that I'll be able to beat the wage that they're currently making, create an awesome living environment or work environment, all those things for that person. So I'm more likely to get great candidates, and those candidates are more likely to stay long-term because I'm giving them better opportunities than they could get locally. Okay, so that really helps you get some great candidates by recruiting specific to cost of living. And then number 3 is I recruit based on talent specific to that position for the location. Now, I know that probably sounds a little bit confusing, but just recently we hired for customer success. So I Googled and I want to look up, hey, where are the top call centers in the US, right? Amex has big call centers. There's other big companies that have big call centers. Like, I want to find someone who works at a call center because, for that specific position, it's a high velocity customer facing role. And that's the type of person that I'm looking for. So I'll find the cities, I'll find the states that employ those type of people, and I'll make sure that we're running ads in those cities, in those states, etc. Maybe it's a sales position. Well, I know that the biggest sales call center or the biggest sales specific states are, maybe Utah or other states like that. So I'm going to recruit specific to those states, to those cities. All right. So these are some advanced recruiting tips to help you get the best candidates in the door. Because remember, if you don't get the right candidates in the door, nothing else matters. But now that we've done that, let's move into advanced interview techniques. Now, the common feedback that I get about my interviews is people always say as they go through the process or after they go through the process and once they're on the team, they say, Chandler, your interviews were like going to a therapist. It's like after going through that process, like I learned so much about myself. You were asking all these probing, deep questions. A lot of times they were personal questions about who I am, about what I care about. And that's important. That's really the North Star, is like, I'm trying to get to know this person. And in your case, you're trying to get to know this person. Do I like this person? Is this person a culture fit? Is this person going to fit in here? Does this person have the values that align with what we care about at Self-Publishing School? And really getting into the why behind why they're applying for this position. That for me is almost always the most important thing, is I want to understand their why. Why do they care about this company? Why do they care about this position? Why are they applying? Why is this something that's not just going to be a short-term thing, that's not going to be a one-year employment, but long-term they care about this mission, and this is truly meaningful to them. This is not just another job that they're applying for. So really the North Star for me, as I'm going through this process, I want people to grow as whether or not they get the position, and I want them to have a positive and amazing experience. And that's what you're creating here, is no matter what, I know that when people go through interviews with me, I'm sending them through the ringer. I'm asking them a lot of questions. I'm probing, and there's a saying that I love. This comes from scaling up and top grading, is dig deep or go to sleep. So if you're just saying, okay, tell me about your last job. What's your boss going to rate you? Okay, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Like, you're getting no new information, and it's all about the second, third, fourth, fifth level question, and also asking the deep and uncomfortable questions, okay? And that's really a skill set I think can't be taught. It has to be learned, is truly being, one of my old bosses would call it interested, not interesting. Right? And so in the interview process, I'm not trying to be interesting and like, oh, I'm amazing, the company is amazing, let me talk to you more about that. And we've all been in interviews like that where the interviewer actually somehow ends up talking the majority of the time. Is like, hold up, I'm here for the interview, right? So you need to be interested, not interesting. Dig deep or go to sleep. But really what we're looking at is like, I want to make sure that this person has amazing experience, yes, but they're going to grow as a result of me asking tough questions. So no matter what, they're going to get through this process. They're going to learn something about themselves. I'm going to learn a whole lot about them through the interview process, and it's going to be super clear. And I'm kind of, I'm repelling people away in a lot of cases, is that they know, like, this is polarizing. It's, hey, either this is a great fit or this isn't a fit. And my goal is to get to that as soon as possible. So sometimes people drop out of the interview process as a result of me doing it this way. And so know that that might happen to you, but the end result is better long-term candidates that are going to be a great fit. They're going to be A players, and they're going to work for you long-term. One big thing to look for as you're interviewing is core values and hunger, or maybe it's grit, maybe it's scrappiness, whatever you want to call it. But for me, those things are always more important than experience, because you can teach skill set, but you can't teach culture fit. So more important than anything else is this person a culture fit? Are they willing to get their hands dirty? I know that at self-publishing school, it's a very in the trenches, we're working alongside each other. Like, if you worked at a huge company and you didn't have to do anything, and you had all these direct reports, and you were just a dashboard manager, then you're probably not going to be a fit here at self-publishing school. And so maybe that's the same for you, but I always look for the scrappiness, the grit. I look for a culture fit. That's the most important thing. And will this person implement? Are they a doer? I had a friend that I was just talking about this with yesterday, and he said, he had mishired for a position a couple times, just rehired for that position. He said, the big difference right out of the gates is this person's a doer. And so I know that this person's going to roll up their sleeves, they're going to get in the trenches, get in the weeds, and they already have, and they're already making a big impact because they're used to getting things done. So that's something that I look for as I go through the interview process. Now, the last few things to think about as you go through the interview process is I want to ask current comp ASAP. And that's super important, because for me, I want to make sure that if someone's coming to self-publishing school, they're making more money at self-publishing school than they're making elsewhere. I want this to be a better situation than elsewhere. So I'm asking compensation history on multiple roles over the last few jobs. I'm getting very specific. What is it currently? What does the benefits look like? All those things. And you obviously want to look into the legality of this. Sometimes it's not allowed depending on your state or things like that. But I think it's super important. I think it's an honest conversation that needs to be had, because I want to make sure, again, that they're making more when they come to my company. Because for me, I'm looking for long-term people and long-term employees. So if I get clear on that sooner than later, maybe that just rules some people out right away. And so I would hate to get through, and this has happened to me all the way through the process, and I'm like, oh man, we can't afford this person, right? And so we went through this whole process, we wasted all this time, and I wish I would have gotten that out as soon as possible. Now, the last couple of things here is super important that you learn to adapt the interview process based on the role and based on how many candidates that you have. So I'm not gonna rehash the whole process that we have. Go to the A-player hiring process video, watch that, go through that. We follow the WHO method, or the top grading method. So we've got kind of our screening interviews, we've got our focused interviews, we've got our top grading interviews, then we've got reference checks, we've got all those things, but we can expand and contract or move around this interview process based on the role and based on how many people that we have. So if you're hiring for a leadership position, you want to do more interviews, and then I've started adding a half day or a full day in-person interview as the last step. Now, these are people who are going to be leading my team, and these are people that I'm going to be working with for years. So I think this is a worthwhile investment. I'll fly them in and we'll do a full day interview. And I think this is super important. I get a lot of pushback when I teach this to other founders, other entrepreneurs. They're like, oh my gosh, so busy. How could you possibly give up like basically a full week interviewing your top 3 to 5 candidates? Well, I'll say, how can you afford to mishire someone and work with the wrong leader that then your team is working under the wrong leader? You have people quit, you have people leave, you have people underperform, you have people who aren't growing, who aren't developing. So I think it's the least that you can do to make sure that your company's set up for success in a leadership position is do that half day in person as the final step. Or if it's not a leadership position, then maybe, and it's not in person, virtual like I am, then maybe the last step is a 3-hour interview or a 2-hour interview or things like that. And I know that even when I'm not involved in the hiring process, I always want to have the last interview. That's kind of a final check. It's like, I'm going to really probe and I'm going to really challenge this person. And sometimes they drop out because they can't take it and they know that this is not going to be a fit. But I think, so many CEOs and so many leaders are quick to jump out of that process, and people are the most important thing in your business. So if you're getting out of that process and you're hiring the wrong people, then it doesn't matter any of the other things that you do. If you got the wrong people, you're not going to succeed. So I want to be involved at least as the last step in every person that gets hired, every person that comes in the door. Now, one final thing here. So I started doing this. This is kind of fun, especially for leadership positions. So you've got your focused interview, which is focused on the skill set. You've got the top grading interview, which is kind of focused on job history and all those things. But I've started doing with my focused interviews, and this leads to some really fun and interesting conversations. This also weeds people out very quickly. As I start with the mission of this role and then ask them how they're going to do it. So you might try this in some of your interviews, but say, for example, I just recently hired a sales leader. I said, hey, the goal is to help us grow from 8 million to 20 million a year over the next year and a half. So my first question is, how are you going to do it? And that's how I start the interview. It's like you can just tell that people are just immediately taken aback. So you learn a few things. You learn, how does this person respond under pressure? And then, but most importantly, I don't care about their answer. I care about their thought process to get to that answer. Because obviously they don't know a ton about the business yet. That's going to change. But I want to see, do they ask a bunch of questions? I want to see, how do they think through this? Are they analytical? Do they have the ability to sift through the most important data? What are the numbers that they're looking at? What are the main KPIs or key needle movers that they look at? Are they people focused? Are they numbers? There's so many things that you learn from this question. And so that's why I love to start with that question in the focused interviews. And whether it's a leadership position or any position, to say, hey, the mission of this position is XYZ over X time period. How are you going to do it? And you'll be surprised what you learn and what that says about the candidate. All right, we're in the home stretch. The last thing I want to talk about is some advanced hiring techniques. Now, I just have a couple things to cover here. Again, A-player hiring process video, that kind of goes into the full thing. This is going to be specific mostly to leadership positions. So if you're hiring for leadership positions at your company, that'll be the last 2 things. And then the first thing will be no matter what position you're hiring for. So first, I want to talk about the concept of hiring. This is what Jeff Bezos calls bar raisers. Okay, so this is someone who raises the bar. And so the question I want you to ask, and I think the question that you should be asking as you go through the interview process, as you go through the hiring process, is this person better than our best performer in this area, right? Because I want someone who's going to raise the bar. I don't want someone who's kind of in the middle. So as we're going and as we're hiring, as we're scaling, it's important that you bring in people that continually raise the bar. And a lot of times as you grow, I make the joke that's a lot of people that are at the company wouldn't have gotten hired right now going through our process. But that's the benefit, again, for them of getting in at the ground floor and starting. And then they know that they got to keep growing to qualify or requalify for their existing position. But also, how do we keep things fresh? And how do we challenge the people who are already here? It's by bringing in bar raisers and bringing in people who are going to raise what we call best is the standard. This is one of our core values, bringing in those folks that are going to raise that standard from day one. So what I want you to ask is this question again: is this person better than my top performer? So I just hired a sales rep at self-publishing school, or we just hired a sales rep. And that was the question I asked is, can this person be better than our top performer? If not, what are we doing? We don't need someone who's middle of the road. We do the same thing with student success. Can this person raise the standard? Are they better, or do they have the potential to be better than our top performer? So ask that question. And if the answer is no, that probably means you need to hire someone else, or you didn't recruit hard enough in the beginning because you didn't get enough great candidates into the process. Number two, and this is specific to hiring for leadership positions, and that's to hire the best leader, not always the best skill set. So I've just went through the last 6 months I hired for basically half of my leadership team. So two of the biggest positions in the entire company I hired over the last 6 months. And these were kind of the highest level hires that we've ever made. And so I learned some really good things as I went through the research process, as I went through the interview process. And ultimately this helped me select the best candidates, and they are thriving in their roles, and it's because of this. It's because you're gonna do kind of a competency analysis, and when you look at it, you're gonna say, hey, this person maybe is a little bit better from a skill set perspective, so X's and O's, maybe technically. If it's sales, maybe they have the most sales experience. If it's marketing, maybe they have really good technical ads experience or messaging experience or whatever. Or if it's student success, maybe they have all the technical experiences there, but if they're not a great leader, they are not going to succeed. And so tie goes to the leader. And so especially if I'm super close, I got a top 3, I've worked really hard, I've recruited, I've interviewed, we had 100-something candidates, we're all the way down to the top 3. That's the decider, is who is the best leader. Because I want you to think about this. When you're putting people in leadership positions, they are leading a group of people. And it's way easier to learn the skill sets. It's way harder to learn the leadership skills. And this is the soft skills. It's all those things. It's what I'm going to talk about in the next point. But that, at the end of the day, that makes the difference. So I'd rather have a better leader that can learn the skill sets than have a really strong technical person that might take years to become a great leader. Because those years of lacking of leadership are going to slow down the development of the entire team. Now, third is the hire for EQ and self-awareness. This is something especially also important in leadership positions. So there's IQ, there's EQ. So IQ is obviously your intellect, is something that gets talked about a lot. EQ, so emotional intelligence, is something that doesn't get talked about a lot. So does this person have high emotional intelligence? So you'll see that in the interview process. Are they aware of what's going on? Are they aware of maybe the cues that you're given or things that are happening through the process? Like, are they navigating that well? Because again, especially if you're hiring for leadership positions, great leaders have great EQ because at the end of the day, you're working with people. People are human beings. And so I'm able to pick up on, oh, you seem a little down. Oh, it looks like you need some encouragement. Oh, you're doing really well. Oh, I'm going to customize my leadership approach to you because you respond well when I challenge you. You respond well when I encourage you. But that all comes down to EQ and then self-awareness. So EQ is what allows people to pick up on signals from the people that they're leading and all those things. But then self-awareness helps them get better. And those are two different things, right? Because if I have high level of self-awareness, I'm going to be coachable. I'm going to continue to improve long term. I'm going to know where I need to improve, and I'm going to seek out ways to improve those things. And again, this is just one of those things I think can't be taught, is a high level of self-awareness. Now, lastly, and this is a bonus tip, and it's all about hiring for attitude. Now, I'll probably record a different video on this at some point, but I've read this great book. It's called Hiring for Attitude. And what I realized is at self-publishing school, we got really, really good at the X's and O's of hiring. Right? That here's how you recruit, here's how you interview, here's all that stuff. But then I realized as I transferred that skill set from me to other people on the team, that it was the why, it was the philosophy, it was all those things, really a lot of the things I'm covering in this video that we were missing. And also, in addition to the technical stuff, we were missing kind of the attitudinal based hiring. And so that's what this book talks about. Highly recommend it, Hiring for Attitude. Top Grading and Who, those are really good and technical recruiting manuals. And then this is kind of the why, or the more soft skills of interviewing well and of hiring well. And really what it talks about is this concept called brown shorts. So it's kind of funny, but really they walk through, Southwest Airlines, they're known for fun, and that's kind of their unique thing. So one of the things Southwest Airlines does is when you come in for an interview, people for executive positions, for a lot of those type of positions, a lot of times people come in and they're wearing a suit. And so they say, hey, this is a group interview, and they say, hey, we've got these brown shorts for you. We want to make sure that you're comfortable. We want to make sure that you feel comfortable here. We'd love for you to, just put those on if you'd like. If not, no pressure. But here are these brown shorts. And so you got all these kind of corporate executive types that are in a suit and they're like, those big baggy brown shorts, like why would I put those on? But here's the thing, that's a test. And if people don't put them on, they actually get dismissed from the interview process. And if people do put them on, then they know that, hey, this is someone who doesn't take themselves too seriously. This is someone who is fun, who probably has the ethos or the core values that we have at Southwest. And so I'm not saying you need to do brown shorts and add that to your interview process or anything like that. But what is important and what the book talks about is identifying what is that ethos for you. Like, what are those core competencies, those values? So values or attitudes or competencies that this person needs to have, and it's all about defining those values. So I create a spreadsheet for each position. So we have our kind of full team core values and competencies that don't change, and attitudinal things and questions to ask specific to that. Then we have leadership specific, and then we have values and competencies specific to that position, okay? So all those three things are covered, and then also we have questions to ask to uncover that. So I think this is just a super important thing. It's pretty advanced from an interviewing and hiring perspective, but it really rounds out the hiring process to make sure that you're hiring not only for the person with the best skill set, but also for the person that really has all of the soft skills, the attitude, the core values that they need to succeed in your company. So there you have it. It's another long one, but again, I just wanted to drop the mic on advanced hiring techniques that I've discovered, that I've used to going through this process. We've hired so many people. I've probably interviewed hundreds of people over the last year or two just going through this process. And so it's the little nuanced things that make a big difference for hiring someone great. So I hope that you found this video helpful. I hope that you found this valuable. This was a good use of your time. I'd love to hear your main takeaways. So what were your favorite things that you learned from this video that you're going to implement from this video in your hiring? Scroll below this video right now. Comment, let me know. Seriously, take 2 minutes to do that right now. Comment, let me know what were your biggest takeaways from this video, or what are some things that you do that maybe I didn't cover in this video that help you hire great people? I'd love to hear that. I'd love to kind of crowdsource that. You can scroll below this video, comment below on that as well. Okay, so scroll below this video right now, comment on the video. As always, click the like button and click the subscribe button to subscribe to this channel or to this podcast, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.